In this episode of Green Signals, the railway podcast, managing lineside vegetation, and it's a lot more complex than any of us thought. Should the remaining section of the Borders Railway, south from Tweedbank to Hoyk and on to Carlisle, be rebuilt? And if not, given the runaway success of the first section from Edinburgh, why not? 5 years after announcing its Reversing Beeching initiative, what exactly has been achieved? The Green Signals verdict is, at best, very little. We'll look at why. And a good news story to warm your heart involving a vintage train set. Hello, and welcome to Green Signals from me, Nigel Harris, and
me, Richard Bowker.
Here again to talk about trains, our favourite thing. If you're enjoying Green Signals, please give the episode a thumbs up. And if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. It's completely free, and it really does help us to grow the show and do lots more of what you want and enjoy. You can also visit greensignals.org, our website, and sign up to our mailing list so that we can let you know when we publish each new episode. And, of course, let you have some exclusive content when we've got it. It's a slightly different show this week as it's half term, so Steph's away with her family, having a fantastic time in a rather damp Lincolnshire, visiting the sadly non-flying as yet Lancaster bomber Just Jane at the Lincolnshire Aviation Heritage Centre, and then on to see the only flying Lanc in the UK, one of only two in the world, at the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight at Coningsby. And I know you've got all three of your teenagers at home, Richard, for half term. Doubtless a pleasure, but a handful at the same time. So it's all rather mad. But we didn't want to miss a week, so here we are, leaner and shorter, but still perfectly formed, at least, we hope.
Indeed. I'm not sure about having teenagers back home. Yeah, no, it's been quite exciting the last couple of days.
I bet it has.
One thing that's lovely is we still keep getting these incredible comments. Actually, I tell you what. Well, they're growing, and yes. We apologise. It sometimes it just takes ages to get around to the dozens of them. So forgive us. But there was this one from an old mutual friend for both of us, actually, John Veach on X, this was lovely from John. Your fabulously factual and researched, honest weekly programmes are now a firm part of my working week with a dedicated slot in my diary.
Oh,
we love
thanks,
that.
John.
Yeah, it was lovely. So last week, Tony Wilson said we were fascinatingly fabulous. And this week, John has raised the linguistic level with fabulously factual. So that's great.
You can't beat a bit of effing alliteration, can you? John also asked, well, just shows the attention people pay. John also asked where my, heritage BRML mug is and your D345 mug, Richard. Well, I have it here this time. There it is. Just for you, John. Got the coffee in it. In actual fact, just as a side note, Richard, given the amount of time I was on rail and the amount of coffee mugs that people did as promotions, I have a huge collection. You know, the LNER Let's Go Round Again for the last HST in 2019, Burst Rails 2005, winner of the National Rail Awards, and the oldest of the lot, which is probably archaeological, is a Res mug. Now, that was red, was that 47, but it's been through the dishwasher that many times. It ain't now. So, speaking of mugs, I'm hoping ours come along soon, Richard, but we all live in hope. We always hope to have an appropriate one in hand.
We do. Well, both being from the north of England, you can't be without a brew, can't you? Actually, apologies to folks. I think you've probably noticed we've thrown everybody's diaries a bit out this week. We've done an episode on Tuesday early this week, and we've done an episode today, which is a Thursday when we're recording this. Now, you may listen on a completely different day anyway, so it probably doesn't matter. But we will. It was because I went out with Nick Millington, and we just thought it'd be great to get that video up of my trip to Wales and Borders, which we'll talk about. But yeah, if you've subscribed to the channel, you'll always get a notification, so you'll never miss anything anyway.
You've been out and about on the railway in that first, as you say, of what we hope will be a major series of new videos we've christened The Railway Explained. And we'll aim to covering a wide range of stuff. So where did you get to? What did you see? Tell all.
Right. Well, it was a fantastic trip. So I went out with Nick Millington, MBE, who is the route director for Wales and Borders, which is a massive region. So it literally covers the whole of Wales. So, from and you can imagine what that is. So you cross under the tunnel at Severn Tunnel, and then it's everything up to the edge of Merseyside, Anglesey, West Wales, and so on.
Big variety of railways then.
And I think that was the point. It was massively diverse. So you got electrified lines. You've got
commuter lines,
branches, freight. You name it. They'd got it. It was amazing. And what was interesting was just how clearly it's increasingly tough to run this infrastructure, and that was very obvious. What we went to see, we actually started in England, which technically wasn't on his patch, but it was fascinating to see since we were passing it. So I went to see a lagoon that they've built, which holds about 11 million litres of water.
Sounds very exotic, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's basically just a big hole, really, that fills up when the rain comes. But it's 11 million litres of water, which incidentally is the same amount they pump out the Severn Tunnel every day. Right? But this lagoon is designed to effectively act as a sump, so that when it's heavy rain, it fills up rather than goes on the track, and then they pump it out when it's safe to do so. It's not big enough, which is extraordinary. So the other day, he sent me a picture of it overtopping and the flooding,
really?
Shipping Sobry. Yeah. So there's serious challenges caused by. Right? It's fantastic what they've done, but it's just getting more of a challenge all the time. We then went to Severn Tunnel Junction and chatted about some of the things they've done there in terms of vegetation clearance and where they've been successful. And then we went out to look at a foot crossing. So not a full-blown level. I mean, it is a level crossing, but it's for footpath. Footpath. That's a place called Brynigwynham, which is near Llanharan, just between, not far from Bridgend, where because of vegetation issues, there's a temporary speed restriction which limits the line speed the line speed is 75, and this speed restriction drops it to 50 because of sight lines round a bend, because of trees, which they can't easily get rid of because they need an ecology license, and there's evidence of dormice and right. And what I you kind of got to watch the video. In fact, the video's, if I say it myself, was really interesting, mainly because of what Nick said and what he explained. And I had not realised just how complex it was to get these licenses. And Nick was very careful. He was not saying we shouldn't worry about any of the ecology. He was saying the opposite, actually, which was we should care, but we're all living in silos and we need to kind of raise it up a level, because what's happening is we're not using the railway for its most effective, and it is an environmentally friendly, sustainable form of transport. And we're not doing it because we've kind of got a little bit of sort of siloed thinking that's not enabling get these licenses. And some of these licenses were taking 2 years, 3 years. I mean, it was incredible. It was quite torturous a process. And my whole conclusion was that, Network Rail are a competent body. They've got the people, they've got the ecologists, they do things carefully and properly. Now I thought, why aren't they allowed to self-certify? Yes, be audited, that's fine, but self-certify so that they can manage their programs, their contractors, their possessions, all of that kind of stuff, and get the job done. Interesting fun fact, if you cut an ash tree down as part of a program which has been properly managed, when it's safe to climb and all the rest of it, you're saying about £200 a tree. If you don't properly manage it and it's entirely reactive and the tree's dead or dying and you can't climb it safely, you're looking at around about £5,000 a tree, a factor of 25. And that's our money. That's taxpayers' money. That is money that we could be spending on doing other things. So it was fascinating. Got to watch the video.
I was just going to say that very thing, because Nick, some of the things he says are gobsmacking in terms of some of the stats, like the one you've just quoted. and the procedures they have to go to. And I have to say, this is an area in which I've got considerable sympathy with Network Rail. I mean, after all you've just said, how on earth do you plan a possession when you don't know whether you got a license coming through or not?
Well, you can, but then you might have to cancel it.
Cancel at the last minute.
And that costs money. It messes the train operators around. Everybody loses, really. So it's...
Well, that's right. And you've got machinery and all the rest of it. And if it's all got to be done again. So, yeah, the self-certification would save a fortune and make things a lot better. I mean, just real hot off the press this week. I mean, look at that landslip at Coventry that brought the West Coast Main Line to a complete standstill. A standstill. Is there any other kind? Like waiting for the train to come to a complete stop. That always winds me up when you hear it on a train. Is there any other kind? But there is an increasing number of very significant, unbudgeted stuff has to be done like that, all within the confines of the control period settlement, hasn't it? And I do have a lot of sympathy with Network Rail. How on earth do you get all that done? And then if you're going to run out of money to do the stuff that you're supposed to be funded to do as well, it's very difficult. And that self-certification would make a real difference, wouldn't it?
I think so. Yeah. We're going to be doing more of these videos, Nigel, aren't we? So we've created this little playlist on YouTube called The Railway Explained, where this video with Nick is, and there'll be others coming along as well. And we're just going to do lots and lots of stuff like this. It's a lot of fun. It's really interesting. And I learned a load, and so hopefully other people will too.
Indeed. With your Monsal Dale one, you're 2 ahead of me now. I'm going to have to whip my gimbal out and get shooting, aren't I?
I think, yes.
Now, the Cumbrian Railways Association, one of my favourite groups, has a relatively low national profile. No surprise there. But it's a cracking grassroots organisation that, alongside its superb photographic archive, top-quality historical research, lecture meetings, and really good quality book publishing, it also quietly but relentlessly campaigns on local rail issues, and more strength to them for that. They are very energetic, and we've put their membership details on the website because they're a great group to be a member of, even if you're not in Cumbria or specifically interested there. Good stuff. Now, their digital newsletter popped into my inbox recently, and one story in particular caught my eye. Progress on the feasibility study to reopen the rest of the Borders Railway, south of the current terminus at Tweedbank, through Hoyk and onwards through all that wild country to Carlisle. Now, ever since the Borders line was opened by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II between Edinburgh and Tweedbank on September the 9th, 2015, it's been a roaring success, but maybe Richard doesn't think so, I don't know. With passenger numbers rapidly outstripping the forecast, this prompted cries for enhancing the railway with more double track. For cost reasons, a chunk of the reopened line was, inexplicably to many, designed as single-track railway, including bridges, which would make doubling a costly move. Anyway, following this success, the campaign has continued to reopen the entire Waverley route through the Borders to Carlisle with a tenacious and well-organised campaign for Borders Rail in the vanguard. The CRA reports that the 2 governments involved have now signed off funds for a feasibility study, and a project manager is soon to be appointed. Now, without even asking, I just know that our very own Victor Meldrew will have a strong view, so buckle up. Richard?
Victor Meldrew, I think that's a little harsh, right? Well, look, you've made some great points there. It has been a success. The trains are busy. I don't know what the loads are throughout the day, but certainly, peak periods, they're very popular, and it has undoubtedly improved access from, Tweedbank, Galashiels, and places up the line into Edinburgh. So it'd be foolish if we said anything differently to that.
There's a but coming, I can hear it.
Well, it cost an absolute fortune to do it. And so there's always the question, twice what the estimates were when the SRA said no to it, whenever we did say no to it.
So what did it cost?
It was something in the order of 350 million pounds, and I don't think that includes OPEX. So the question is always, we accept it's delivered something, but was there a more cost-effective way of delivering it than that? Now, immediately everybody's going, oh, yes, but. look at the strategic benefits it's delivered, look at the wider economic benefits it's delivered. And we've got to remember what Bill Reeve said when he was on Green Signals a couple of months ago now. And he made a perfectly fair point and said that if you measure the benefits of the Borders Railway against almost like classical transport appraisal guidance,
conventional criteria.
Yeah, what the DfT call their web tag methodology, it doesn't stack up. But that's not what we've done in Scotland, he said. In Scotland, we've got different criteria that we measure for, which are more socio-economic. They're delivering the main outcome. I think he's listed about 4 or 5 key outcomes that the Scottish government want to achieve. And if you measure it against that, it delivers a positive outcome. And I said, then look, if you want to move the goalpost, I said that out loud. If you want those to be your criteria, that's fine, right? Mm-hmm. What I object to, and have always objected to, is when people go, oh, it's just strategic. It just makes sense. Get it done. It shouldn't have ever shut. Those are not criteria against which you should measure these things. Now, I do always worry about a thing called confirmation bias when it comes to railway reopenings, and this actually generates quite a lot of emotion of itself. Confirmation bias is, we're all guilty of it, right? I think Blackburn Rovers is the best football team in the world, despite 30 years of results proving mainly evidence to the contrary, right? But
so you look for the evidence to prove your point.
Yeah, you look for the evidence to prove your point. And it's more deeply entrenched where it becomes very emotional, or it's a deeply entrenched belief. And right, people who believe that certain railway lines should never have closed and should reopen again do evidence it quite strongly, right? And it's very, very difficult, by the way, to put your deeply entrenched beliefs to one side and have the critical thinking skills to be able to go, well, actually, let me take the emotion out of this. Does it make sense? It's very hard to do that. And I'm not being condescending. I find it hard to do, right? Everybody finds it hard to do. But railway reopenings seem to bring it out more than anything else.
They do, but what I would want to know is, are we definitely capturing the full range of benefits? I mean, I've talked to Bill about this, and he will say, and has said many times to me, and I've heard him say it to others, that it wasn't a railway reopening. It's a tool for the development economically and socially of the Borders region.
Sounds great, that, doesn't it? I mean, how do you measure that? Right. So, look, I think the fact remains that somebody somewhere really wanted to do it, so they did. Right?
And that somebody was a Scottish government.
Yeah. Now, does that make it a bad decision? Of course it doesn't make it a bad decision, but you're still spending a lot of taxpayers' money. At least with the Borders Railway from Tweedbank and Galashiels and Stow and, all the Stow, sorry.
Into Edinburgh.
To Edinburgh, I kind of get my head around that. Going south, there's 2 issues. Issue 1 is Howick, which is a town, a very substantial town in one of the most, is with quite a deprived region in terms of sort of economic value. And I can actually see why there would be benefit in...
It's got lousy connectivity, hasn't it?
Yeah. But south of Howick, and it's quite a long way from Tweedbank to Howick, by the way, actually. It's not like next door. That's quite a project in itself. South of Howick to Carlisle, you said wild country.
I did.
There's nothing, right? There is nothing. And this idea that it will deliver something for Carlisle as well, I am really struggling. Now, if there's going to be yet another feasibility study, then fine. But this is serious amounts of public money, and we absolutely can't do it just because someone comes up with some fluffy, wider economic mumbo jumbo. So
we have to make sure we capture the full range of benefits and not just some of them. I mean, lots of people will be going into Edinburgh at the moment on the existing railway and spending money in shops and hotels and pubs and bars and everything else. I see no evidence of any attempt to capture that. Going south from Edinburgh, I can see a number of words propped in now which will trigger you. You're right, there is nothing between Howick and Carlisle. There's nothing effectively between Lancaster and Carlisle or Carlisle and settle. But it didn't stop railways being built, which have got considerable value. So we need to be wary of that. I just want to see more evidence and it not be dismissed. And even Bill has dismissed it with me, as you have, but there's only 2 sheep between, you said to me once, between Hoyk and Carlisle.
Thousands of sheep. I think I said only 2 people, right?
Right. Oh, sorry.
Thousands of sheep.
Yes, you're right. Yes, okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to say strategic now, but if you look at a map, instinctively, I want to believe that Edinburgh is somewhere significantly off to the east of Carlisle. Well, of course it isn't. If you look at a map, it's virtually due north.
I think is it not west of Bristol? It's something quite extraordinary.
But the route itself is pretty much a north-south axis, and I can't see how that hasn't got some strategic value rather than grinding round the curves at Carstairs.
Strategic for what? So strategy. The word strategy.
I knew it would trigger you.
No. But it's defined in the dictionary as a series of costed plans to deliver a specific series of objectives. It's not it's not a vision. A vision's a different thing, right?
Strange people have visions, don't they?
Yeah, if it's strategic, it's quite granular, actually.
I was just about to go on to say...
What is the strategy
I was just about to go on to say, I would want to see some sort of evaluation of what the potential is for diversionary routes, for easing the congestion on the West Coast Main Line, for freight. Also, I just want to see all the work done before we dismiss it as being thousands of sheep and 2 people, which is, I think, not really. I think that's about as valuable as just saying, let's open it because we think it's a good idea. But anyway, let's move on, shall we?
I don't know. I always quite enjoyed that, but
well, we can stick with it if you like.
Okay.
But I'm sure we'll come back to it, Richard. I'm sure we'll come back to this one. But look, we ought to expand. You've touched on it in some of your rather dismissive comments there, I felt.
Ooh.
On the reversing, beeching, restoring railways initiative from the DFT. 4 years after Shapps announced it, I hope I'm not being too sort of simplistic here, literally nothing has happened that wasn't going to happen anyway. Oakhampton, it wasn't even a beeching closure in June 72, so it's annoying that Shapps or other people keep billing it as an example of reversing beeching. And Blythe Ashington, of course, the northeastern reopening there had much more to do with Nexus's highly energetic and effective Tobin Hughes than Grant Shapps. But am I being unreasonable when I said that nothing's happened and is not likely to happen that wasn't already in the mix anyway?
Well, no, I don't think that is unreasonable.
Thank God for that. We returned to agreement.
Well, because the evidence is that very little's happened. Now, where we would probably differ is that when it was announced, I think I said at the time, and nothing will actually really happen, partly because nothing really should happen, right? It was a grandstanding, crowd-pleasing. It's one of those things where you say the words beeching closures and people start, it's like a Pavlovian response. They start behaving in weird ways.
And significantly, just to interject at that point, the people who most react like that and leap into the world of Miss Marple and villages and, all the rest of it is the national media. The minute you talk about rolling back beeching, the national press, print and broadcast completely loses all reason. And this is, over my time in railway journalism, has come up a time or two. I agree. It's a cynical move by the government to distract everybody from what's going on over here.
That's the word. So I think it was an absolute distraction tactic, right? And so they created a fund. So the fund, the Restoring Your Railways Fund, was not money to reopen these things. It was money to look at studies about maybe one day thinking about perhaps reopening some of these things. Right? So when you look at those 2 examples you gave, interestingly about the Dartmoor line to Oakhampton and what's happening in the northeast, the fundamental infrastructure is
already there.
Mark Hopwood was actually running a Sunday service to Oakhampton pretty much anyway.
He was.
Now what they've done, but we can only really talk about Oakhampton because that's the one that's actually open, is fabulous, right? It is fabulous. And there's some stuff that's happened with bus integration and changing bus patterns that's really helped open up access to that
and it's
part
extended the reach of the railway by
enormously.
considerable distances in Devon by bus links from the station, and they've
It
done a
absolutely
fantastic
has.
job working with the local authority, it has to be said.
But the infrastructure was fundamentally already there, right?
They relayed it all, but yes, it was. It wasn't an overgrown, sodden, abandoned track bed.
No, absolutely right. But when you look at, I think we need to have some good old-fashioned green signals deep dive into some of this stuff. So at the moment, because we only thought about doing this sort of like yesterday, I haven't had a chance to do too much yet. So this is all a bit sort of top level, but we'll come back to this in future shows. But I did have a look at all the things that have been approved to be looked at. So this isn't things that are definitely going to happen. This is things that that got through the various SIFT rounds. There was 3 rounds, wasn't there? And some of them are. I'm going to.
Insane is the word.
Well, you're going to say I'm going to be dismissive again now, but I'll give you an example.
Probably reasonably dismissive in this case.
Reopening Kemble to Cirencester. I mean, really? Anyway, but some of them are actually quite rational, but they tend to be stationary openings, or they tend to be service enhancements on existing lines. And they, so some of the station stuff, Beeston Castle, I think Tarpley and Beeston Castle station is one of them. Good idea, right? There's some others that are good ideas, but they're not reversing Beeching really, and that's the issue. The stuff that I think people get excited about, I just don't. I don't see it happening because I don't think it should happen. That's the problem. I think a couple of weeks ago, we talked about a thing called Everyone's Railway that the SRA wrote 20 odd years ago.
Best railway document I ever saw.
Thank you. In that, we said there are some things that the railway's absolutely brilliant at. And in fact, there's nothing better. So intercity, direct, high speed, limited stop services, sensational. At the time, high capacity, high frequency commuter services in the major conurbations. I know that's changed slightly with, post-COVID and all the rest of it, but it's still true. Homogeneous freight, over long distances, absolutely sensational. But there are some things it's really not very good at that was in 2003, but it's no less relevant in 2024. And that is, down a branch line to little snoring or wherever it is. Now,
how did that go?
Well, I know. That was terrible, wasn't it? But what I mean is, railways are good at some things, and they're not so good at many other things. And a lot of this slightly whimsical stuff in reversing Beeching is just not appropriate.
Hence my Miss Marple reference, because
I like that. That was quite a good one. I'll tell you one thing though, and I'm going to sound as if I've done a complete U-turn now. One of the things I found on the Restoring Your Railway list of projects, there it is, was looking at reinstating rail access to Devizes via a new station at, I'm going to pronounce this wrong. If you're from Wiltshire, I apologise. It's either Lidway or Lidway, and I'm sorry, I probably got both of those wrong. So I thought, that's quite interesting because I don't live too far from Devizes. I'll find out a bit more about that.
On the Barks and Hants.
So anybody's not sure, Devizes used to have its own railway line, actually. That closed. But Devizes, the town, is quite close to the Barks and Hants main line, so between Pewsey and Westbury, right? So it's a very, very busy piece of high-speed railway. So I had a quick look at the interim feasibility study for Devizes Gateway, which was published in March last year. I'm holding it as a camera. There it is. It's quite a big document, right?
For those of you listening in black and white, Richard has just sifted through.
Yeah, sorry. If you're listening to this and not on YouTube, then I have just sort of leafed through a 40-odd page document. The executive summary says, it's by the way, from what I've read, I've skimmed it. It's well written, okay? But it talks about, the economic activity in the area, and it talks about the benefits and so on and so forth. All solid stuff. It then says this. Cost advice is that the station could be delivered for circa 52.2 million to 65.7 million.
What? That's a double track station?
Yeah. including Westbury Platform Zero. So they need another platform. They basically need a turn-back facility, I think, at Westbury, so that if you can run a stopping service.
Oh, okay.
Padding, yeah. But 65.7 million, that was 12 months ago, so we've had a bit more inflation since then.
That'll be 100 now.
And there's a bit of me goes, hang on a minute. Having said that, I'm not sure about reopening our railway lines. It's 70 million nearly for.
It's outrageous, isn't it?
I'm struggling to compute the numbers.
Yeah,
I really am. So that needs looking at as well, and we've got to find it. We've got to find a more cost-effective way of being able to get more of these services, the stations reopen and stuff like that. Because that kind of number, that even I'm as an economist looking at that, going, that just doesn't feel right.
Couple of questions. One, did you have all that and have to, squeeze down on outrageous costs when you got Platform 4 at Swindon rebuilt, which was one of your achievements? And secondly, as you just said then, your words, it's a high-speed main line. Does it make sense to reintroduce a stop into all that with its impact on capacity and performance and everything else? Because there's no way we're going to build a station with loops so that it's got fast lines through so it doesn't interrupt the rest of the railway's business, is it?
That's an excellent point. I mean, people forget this. They say, oh, we'll have a new station here and a new station there. Well, you've got to decelerate, you've got your stop at your dwell time, you've got your acceleration again. And whilst you're doing that, everything that was non-stopping through it, there's a slot been used. So that is a very, very fair point. And actually in this Devizes study, it talks about there are challenges in capacity on the Berks and Hants main line. And that's one of the reasons why, there could be some negative impacts of that. Fair enough, right? Your Swindon Platform 4 question is a very good one. So Swindon Platform 4, for those who aren't aware, 40 years ago, as part of a rationalisation by British Rail, they took out a platform at Swindon. And so everything that was going on the down fast, so London to Bristol or London
westbound, all westbound stoppers.
Sorry, thank you. Westbound, right? Had to cross over the eastbound main line to London to access a platform that was on the other side of that, right? So it absolutely, excuse my French, knackered stopping patterns and capacity through Swindon. So we did a number of projects. One was Swindon Platform 4. So we reinstated the westbound platform, which you can see there now. And it was a test case that John Armitt and Ian Coucher and I did SRA and Network Rail to say, we got to find a faster, smarter, cheaper way of getting these things done. Now, in the end, it wasn't especially cheap, but I can't remember the exact numbers, and it is 20 years ago now. But we got it done in literally next to no time, and we did that. And we redoubled the tracking, the Great Western Main Line in Cornwall between Probus and Bungalow. That was also part of that same group of projects, and they all got done in literally no time compared to today. So it can be done.
But you need somebody to get the project by the throat and to properly lead.
Yeah.
And to squeeze the cost down, doesn't it?
Yeah. No,
very interesting. But that business about perturbation of ongoing things, because you said yourself a minute or two ago that what the railway does well is long distance intercity non-stop traffic. Well, there's a reason why places like Little Bytham, Corby Glen, Garstang and Cattrall, Shap Station on the east and west coast main line shut because they were, not to put too fine a point on it, buggering up the long distance traffic, weren't they?
Yeah, but Devizes, right?
And that could do the same.
Well, Devizes is not Garstang and Cattrall with the greatest respect to Garstang.
It's a station on a double track main line. That's
yes, it is. And that's a fair point. But it's a big place, right?
Yeah. And a wealthy place.
It's not, yeah, it's not. But it's not that far to go to Chippenham either, which has got a half-hourly service. So it's quite a complicated thing. But the point I think we are certainly I'm trying to make is that none of these things are going to happen if it's going to cost £65 million. So although I know I sound like Victor Meldrew when it comes to rail reopenings, please be assured that's only because I can't bear, because it's just a good idea, right?
I know.
That's
we've touched on this before, Richard, and you've made exactly the same point.
But I actually have a lot of sympathy with the campaigners.
I know.
When the railway comes back and says 65 million quid for two platforms.
Well, do you remember Soham, a single track, single platform station, 20 million quid?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we build Kenilworth and don't use it, So anyway, thanks for that rather wishy-washy and vague view, Richard. I think you should stop beating about the bush and tell us what you really think. I suspect there'll be a fair few comments in response to what we've both said, and I look forward to that, including some disagreement, not least from me, obviously, on some aspects at least. So please feel free to give us your views. But before we move on, if you want to see Richard in full afterburner Meldrew mode, just suggest reopening the Peak Main line through Derbyshire.
You're such a wind-up merchant. But look, right, you've pressed the button now. Right, that's
Boom.
Another classic example of...
Here come the afterburners.
No, it's another classic example of, because it's just the right thing to do, right? I'm a member of a Facebook group that does where there's a guy that he publishes old photos of the line. It's fantastic. I mean, and it's a wonderful historical archive, and some of the pictures are just fabulous. But I nearly unfollow it on a regular basis because every time he puts, a picture of a train going over Monsal Viaduct, I can guarantee that this Pavlovian response of people going, criminal, outrageous, get it reopened, put the track back, it should be a railway again. And you just kind of go, oh, please. It's their well-held beliefs, right? These back to this passion again. But there's got to be a better framework for looking at these things. And I think there is now, and I take your point about Borders Railway. I just think that when the government, any government, says things like, we're going to reverse Beeching, it's unfair on people.
And it is a distraction. Anyway,
it's a massive distraction.
Having proved my point, Richard, I think we should move on. Why don't you do the quiz?
Oh, should we do the quiz? Right, okay. You're a terror. Right. Okay. On to the quiz. So
I do enjoy these pods.
I know. So the question was last week, what took place on British Railways for the very last time on the 30th of September, 1972?
See, my guess, without looking it up, and I know now I'd have been wrong, was the last run of the Brighton Bell.
Which a couple of people said, and I think it was a good shout, but you're right. You would have been
wrong.
You were wrong. So the first person with the correct answer this time was Paul Darlington on YouTube, who correctly said it was the last run of the London to Paris leg of the Golden Arrow, and that took place on the 30th of September 1972. So it was the Golden Arrow. So it was a last run of something, and it was on the southern region, but just a different service. So well done, Paul.
One of the most romantically named trains, wasn't it?
La Flèche d'Or.
Yeah, when the Worth Valley got City of Wells going back in 1981, and it appeared for the first time with what the support crew used to call the big toothpicks on the side. Those
that's right. Yeah.
I mean, it just looked stunning. Absolutely. Yeah. The very image of the rail travel being an occasion.
Brilliant. No, I remember that. I remember this. Yeah, no, it was fantastic.
On you go. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, yeah, quite all right. No change there then. So this
I have week... to. Once you start, I can't get in.
Well, you've said two words today that I'm like one of those sleeper spies, aren't they? In those Cold War films, you said reversing Beeching, and I go off.
Boom.
Yeah. Okay. So this week's question: in 1939, you may remember this, Nigel. I don't know.
Oh,
in 1939, which LMS locomotive was shipped to the USA to be exhibited at that year's World's Fair and tour American railroads? So I'll just say it again. Yeah, it's a great one, this. In 1939, which LMS locomotive was shipped to the USA to be exhibited at that year's World Fair and tour America's railroads? If you think you know, usual pack drill, put your answer on X or on YouTube or send us an email. But first one wins.
I shall look forward to it. And we'll close with our new section of positive news at the end of the pod, which looks at some maybe whimsical stuff that didn't make the big headlines, but which are really interesting. And if this one doesn't warm your heart, you have a heart of stone. Excuse me. On January 13th, the BBC reported that a woman had travelled across the country to give a Lincolnshire boy a model railway set kept in storage since the death of her nephew 58 years ago. If it's still in the original packaging, by the way, that'll be a collector's item. Anyway, Val Wilkinson saw that 11-year-old Alfie from Bourne, just up the road from me in Lincolnshire, talk about his hobby on BBC Breakfast. The 75-year-old travelled from her home in Hertfordshire to donate the set, which belonged to her nephew John, who died of cancer in 1966. Mrs. Wilkinson said she wanted Alfie to have the trains after his interview had melted her heart. She said, the trains have been sitting in the loft and I feel so much better knowing Alfie has it and that he'll look after it. Alfie, who's a member of the Market Deeping Model Railway Club, was delighted with the gift. He said, I've always wanted a nice steam locomotive. I don't have an enormous layout at home, so I can't have a really big train, but a smaller one to pull coaches or coal is something I've wanted. Alfie first became interested in model railways when his granddad introduced him to the hobby. He's one of more than a dozen youth members, which is really great to hear, of the Market Deeping Model Railway Club. And you may remember, Richard, a few years ago, Sir Rod Stewart famously donated £10,000 to the club in 2019 after vandals broke in and wrecked, I think it was an exhibition or their club room, which again was another good story. So the Market Deeping Model Railway Club breaching the headlines again there. Well done them. Did you? We've never talked about this, Richard. Were you ever into model railways?
I did have a layout, yeah, that I did with my dad. I never quite had the time, or never made the time to do it particularly seriously. But I did have one. I've still got some of the rolling stock. You'll be delighted to know one of the things I treated myself to a few years ago was a model of a Class 105 Cravens DMU, which reminded me of the railway lines back home.
Well, we both used to travel from to Preston to go train spotting, didn't we, a few years apart on an Accrington Cravens. I hope your model rattles like the real thing. I mean, from my point of view, after using my dad's Hornby 003 rail as a boy and then a few years with trying Hornby, my dad and I switched to British N-Gauge in the early 1970s, which was a challenge because not much was available. We did okay and enjoyed it and exhibited a layout for a few years with the Pendle Forest Model Railway Society in Nelson, which taught me a great deal and not just about model railways. Happy days. I did that until I discovered 12 inches to the foot scale steam when I was about 15 at the Lakeside Railway, which also then led to beer and girls. So that was the last time I did model rail. Maybe I'll return to modelling. Now I've got a slightly less demanding lifestyle. Although Green Signals is keeping me busy. I have to say,
going to say.
I'm more attracted these days to 10.25-inch gauge live steam. So who knows? I may treat myself something like that. Anyway, that's all we got time for this week. We hope you've enjoyed our half-term show. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe so you get notifications when new episodes drop. As we do more and more, that's the best way to ensure you never miss anything new. So thanks for being with us again. And I've enjoyed a bit of cut and thrust with Richard on the subjects we've covered today. So till next time, it's goodbye from me and...
It's goodbye from me.